Good afternoon, everybody. This is Glacial Shield Podcast, and I'm coming to you today. I'm Winter, and I'm with Aegis. Now, we were in the middle of preparing to record our second lore video of the Halo history involving the fall of the Forerunners when we sort of staggered upon a question that neither of us could answer. And we are both pretty extreme Halo fans, so we thought we would bring this to the greater community rather than just sit on it and wait a few weeks and wind up missing the boat. Aegis, I have a question. Are you willing to entertain a very weird train of thought for a few minutes?
Where it's so easy. Yes.
All right. Well, I want to ask you something. Does the way the Halo rings are used in the Halo universe, specifically in Halo 1 and 3, make sense to you? Or specifically prior to me bringing this conversation up to you, did they make sense to you?
Well, okay, so what I first thought was that if a ring activates, then all life within, I think it was like, what, 2 galactic radii is essentially destroyed. But
Right.
what we're kind of finding is that that might not be technically 100% accurate.
Exactly. And we were actually talking back and forth about this because of Zeta Halo, which, without spoiling our next podcast, Zeta Halo is very important to the fall of the Forerunners, and it's going to be very important in Halo Infinite. But a small part of the storyline, or a significant part, depending on where Halo Infinite goes, is that there are humans on Zeta Halo for a significant portion of its existence, and they're being tested in something called the Palace of Pain with the Flood. Now, we don't know all the details, but we know that this Halo ring is activated at least twice before the Battle of Mithrilium. It's activated over Karam Shakur, which I don't think I pronounced right, but it's activated in its first trial run. We know for a fact that humans are free on the ring in cities and they're not killed. Then the Primordial's captured on Karam Shakur, and he's brought aboard the Halo ring. And he appears to be free on the Halo ring, roaming around doing whatever he wants to do. And the Halo ring is activated again at least once. And nothing on the ring dies. The Flood aren't killed. The humans who are not in any form of containment facility or protection facility are not killed. And it's pretty apparent the Primordial's not killed. Aegis, does that make any sense when you look at Halo 1?
No, because if I remember right, the reason that 343 Guilty Spark wanted to activate the ring is because he wanted to either destroy the flood or destroy all potential like food sources for the flood to take host in, right?
Right. And I mean, maybe that could be what he intended was if the Flood get off this ring, there will be nothing left for them anywhere else. So it won't matter if they get off. But that seems like, even for Guilty Spark, very bad logic. And not to mention, it happens again in Halo 3. You choose to activate the Halo Ray to destroy what's on the Ark, which is the Flood contamination, and the Flood that have gotten onto the remade Installation 4. Aegis, what do you see in Halo Wars Awakening the Nightmare?
High charity.
Yes, High Charity is not destroyed on the Ark. Activating the Halo Ring at the end of Halo 3 does not destroy the Flood infestation on the Ark, even though you activated it directly above the Ark. So the implication is the Ark is supposed to be outside of the Halo Ray's range to protect anything that's on it, but even when you activate a Halo directly beside it, it doesn't actually kill what's on the planet. Am I getting that wrong, Aegis, or is there something I'm missing?
Uh, I think you're getting that for the most part pretty right. Like, but I remember like you got we're trying to escape the arc at the end of Halo 3, right? And then that's because we assumed that we would be dying on the ring if we stayed, well, not the ring, sorry, the arc if we stayed there. But it sounds like High Charity still existed, and Awakening the Nightmare, the flood within High Charity were still there. So that leads to think that maybe the rings don't function the way we think they do.
Well, or maybe it's the way their protection works doesn't work the way we think it does. To be honest, I'm not sure. And guys, this really is like we were in the middle of a conversation and it kind of clicked that there was something wrong. But Aegis, that leads to sort of the second thing that I guess we could call it I was whining about when we were discussing this was the Battle of Mithrilion itself. There's two things that really didn't jive well with me. The first is that there were Forerunners who survived by being at the core of Mithrilion, which we know is a precursor technology, but they survived the Halo Ring activation directly in front of this city. The second thing, and this only really clued in here when we were talking about the fight, was just how many Forerunners the Halo Ring was used to take out by Mendicant Bias. Why would a flood aligned AI intentionally activate Halo rings and take out a significant portion of the population that it wants to capture and assimilate? Can you think of any logical reason for that?
I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe the Flood don't need the Forerunners as hosts. Maybe they can get their hosts from something else, or like once the Forerunners are out of the way, like humanity is pretty weakened, so they won't be able to present much of a threat. Same with the Santium, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. And that's a thought. I just, to me, it seems very odd that Halo Infinite seems to be setting up Cortana aligned with the Flood and also aiming to activate a Halo array. Because what you see with the corruption of the Didact, what you see in Halo 2 is the Flood adamant that you not activate the Halo array. They seem to be insistently and repeatedly telling you that's not the right decision. Don't do it. Aegis, do you think I'm going somewhere with this right now?
Uh, I pick up what you're laying down, and I'm not sure if you want me to say it.
I would like to say it, but
You say it.
the Gravemind takes the time to tell you a
Hmm.
few things in Halo 2 and Halo 3, including that the ring will offer you no salvation and that everything will die if you activate the rings. Assuming that the precursors actually are the Flood, and we know that the Forerunners acted like the Covenant in the fact that they use precursor technology to make at least some of their technology. Is it possible that the Halo rings are based on precursor tech and part of the final trial that the precursors are intentionally making things take for the mantle is seeing whether or not they'll activate the Halo array and end all life in the universe? Do you think that's the final test and not trying to combat the Flood?
Doesn't that seem weird though? Because if they activate the rings, wouldn't that kill like the Forerunners? Thus, who would uphold the mantle of responsibility?
Right. But that's the point. They fail. If you activate the rings, you lose. Game over, man. You kill everything. So you kill yourself, you kill all life around you, and the only things that survive are the Flood that have manipulated their way onto the rings.
Yeah, I
And
guess so.
then the Primordial, which has manipulated Faber into making sure as many humans as possible are on Zeta Halo.
God, I wonder if we're gonna see some essence of that in Halo Infinite, right? Because Zeta Halo, like, there should at least be like lore entries or like nods to the Primordial's presence on Zeta Halo when it was there, hundreds of thousands of years ago, right?
Yeah, there must be. And I mean, we know Faber was we'll call him a jerk because this is a family channel, but it was not really hidden that the Primordial, once it was on the Zeta Halo, openly encouraged more humans being brought to the planet, encouraged more testing with the Flood. Now, that was manipulation because they also wanted to trick them into thinking humans were immune. But at the same time, the Primordial intentionally brought as many humans as possible onto the Zeta Halo and then refused to infect the humans, effectively creating an arc for humanity, and then tried to activate the Halo array against the Forerunners using Mendicant bias.
Which I guess that is maybe like the precursor's original plan was that the Forerunners weren't to have the mantle, and this was before the precursors and the Forerunners went to war. It was supposed to be for humanity. So this could be maybe some of the the trickling threads of that remaining like philosophy there. They're trying to save humanity by keeping them in a safe space before the activation of the rings, maybe.
Yeah, and I guess technically the theory already falls short because then the Flood still wouldn't want to activate the Halo array because they want the Forerunners to make that choice, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they didn't kill all the Forerunners, and the Forerunners did wind up activating the rings, effectively failing the test for the mantle.
And
So,
if you think back, like the rings, we'll see certain spots of this in part two, but activations, it didn't kill the life on the rings themselves.
no, and that's what yeah, that's right. The things that are on it are safe. And in every instance we know of, the Flood have manipulated their way onto the rings and
Why?
the
I'm just trying to think of why, because maybe because it's safe from a ring activation, but that you don't get that impression from Halos 1 and 3, and I guess 2.
No, you don't. But it seems to be established in lore that it's factual. And I guess the Flood are capable of learning from the things they assimilate. So if they assimilated builders, they would be aware that being on the ring is safe. I wonder if it's their awareness from absorbing Forerunner builders, or if it's because they already know what the rings are because they're precursor and the rings are precursor tech.
This could be all related to, a lot of precursor tech maybe having like intrinsically like safe properties from the ring's activation. So that's why, like you said, in the core of Maethrillion, Forerunners that remained didn't die. Same with like on the Great Arc and the Lesser Arc.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the greater arc, I think the halos were activated, but there was still I can't remember that part of the fight. But what do you think, Aegis? Are we digging into something here that might be a major plot hole? Um, or do you think we're misunderstanding, i.e., there are specific parts of the rings that are safe, such as structures, although that still wouldn't make sense because, especially in, like, say, Delta Halo, the Flood are everywhere, and therefore they would be in those safe structures, or potentially reseeding after the arc, or after the detonation of the rings from the arc. But we know that there was Flood on Zeta Halo before the first activations. Every way I look through this, I don't see how it can be put together by us misunderstanding.
You
Do
know
you
what's
think
even
it's a potential? Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, what's even tougher? The fact that like there is like intrinsically built into these books and the lore, there's like competing like things like so that leads to thinking maybe there's like lying intrinsically built into the books and the lore. Like you can't believe 100% what you read.
Yeah, because Guilty Sparks telling, I guess it's a spoiler, but Guilty Sparks telling the story from Cryptum to Silentium, and he might be filtering it in some way.
Mm,
And then what you're getting in the Halo games is the Forerunners telling their own story, which initially led to all the lies about the Forerunners only discovering humanity during the Forerunner-Flood war, which is completely wrong. Um,
yep.
and then, yeah, I mean, you're right. It could just be, there could be lies and fiction built into the fictional universe, which would get confusing.
But
But
like it is hard to say. But I mean, just based on the facts, like we read the books, we're pretty well versed in the lore. We played the hell out of the games. It seems like there's like competing things going on in both, which maybe makes me think: is it like a retcon or something that's got maybe it'll be explained later, maybe in Halo Infinite or another book or something, or what? What do you think?
well, yeah, I don't know because I could have forgiven Halo 1 as being like the original game, and therefore they didn't quite have their lore set up right. Um, but Halo Wars 2 showing that High Charity, and I know High Charity technically got blown up, but it's still 90% in one piece. Um, it's surrounded by a shield or a containment dome on the Ark. In other words, the Ark put up defense for it, but the Ark only put up defense for it because it was still there.
Hmm.
So I can't really see it as an overlook. How could they have accidentally been like, oh yeah, the entire point of the end of Halo 3, we forgot about that. um,
That leads me to think, like, they have to be aware of the story and the lore and like the big story beats in the main games and even the books, right? Because I mean, going into Halo 4, the expectation was that you had some knowledge of like the lore outside of the games, so they do call on like the lore from the books and such to feed into the games. So there has to be some like something either we're missing or some further detail that can be explained by simply saying, oh, Forerunner tech or precursor tech is immune to the rings because it's also precursor tech or based on precursor tech.
that would be my best guess, is that the Halo rings, if it's not a plot hole, and if it's not us drastically misunderstanding, which since we plan to put this on the Halo Reddit, we'll find out pretty fast if we're just misunderstanding things. The best thing I can see is the Halo rings are precursor tech, and the Flood are the initiation of the final test, and whether or not you activate the Halo rings is the final test for the mantle about whether or not you'll protect life. Because if the precursors don't believe in good and bad, technically, flood assimilation is the perfect life. Do you get what I'm saying with the perfect life, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess it's just like the natural evolution of the galaxy and like assimilating with the flood is just the natural course for the like species in general. Like they become one to make a more perfect species.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that train of thought, beating the flood is not technically passing the mantle. It
So
doesn't make sense.
so humanity fails it too then, or would fail it.
Well, we'd fail it if we. I mean, I guess the chief did activate the Halo array, but he hasn't done it at a galactic level.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think we've fleshed this out enough for us to come up with a solid, pure theory. But do you think this is something maybe we should bring to the community and see what they have to say?
It's definitely good for a talking point because if we've come up with this, it's definitely come up before, whether Hidden Xperia or any other big lore people in the community. But
But we looked. All we could find was discussion about whether or not the rings will kill you if they're on them, which the answer was maybe, at least from what I could see. There didn't seem to be any discussion of it being a plot hole.
then that really strikes me as weird. Like just
Well,
it's
yeah, but
yeah.
yeah, I don't have an answer. And it's perfectly possible that in our 20 minutes of scanning, we missed something. But I think we should bring this to the community, and I think we should maybe posit a few questions. My first question would be, guys, do you think the Halo rings are actually precursor tech or based on precursor tech? Aegis, what's your question that they could
Hmm.
work through?
I guess what why are the flood drawn to the rings if the rings themselves are supposed to like destroy life?
And why do they seem so intent on using them?
Yeah, exactly. Because wasn't the Grave Mind at the end of Halo 3 like kind of pushing us to use the rings?
Well, maybe. I mean, he in Halo 2, he gives that huge speech about how the rings will end all life, and that the ones who did it already knew what they had done. And then in Halo 3, he no, at the end of Halo 3, I think his objective was purely to, and this might hint that the Gravemind knew that the Ark was safe, even with the Halo on it. His focus was on giving Cortana the logic plague.
If we didn't save her at the end, it was like the mission Cortana, she definitely would have been plagued.
She was plagued. I mean, that's what happens at the end of Halo 5. She
Ye-
turns on humanity.
Yeah, yeah,
So it
right.
almost seems like the Gravemind is setting up the final test for the mantle, and he just didn't care if the Halo ring got activated. He was like, how would it have worked if he had not gotten Cortana back in the Chief's hands? It seems like it was a trap.
You know what's weird about Halo 5? We don't ever set a foot on a Halo ring.
No, no, you don't. I haven't played Halo 5 in a while. It was probably my least favorite Halo. But I'm trying to think through the end of Halo 3 here for a minute.
That should
So
be
okay,
pretty fresh in your
here's
mind because you
something.
just played it.
Yeah, well, I haven't beaten it yet. Actually, the guy I'm playing it through with, yeah, we're stuck on the last level. There's so many questions about the end of Halo 3 now that I'm trying to look at it as, was this a flood trap? You get Cortana back. You activate the Halo ring, which doesn't actually destroy the flood, which might mean the grave mine's not destroyed.
Right.
Cortana's been given the logic plague. You try to jump through a portal and somehow wind up at Requiem,
Yes, I know where you're
which
going. Keep going.
which proceeds to leading Cortana to getting into the domain. And yet, she's already got the logic plague. So the grave mine effectively gives you Cortana, and then you give Cortana to the domain, and she proceeds to shut down all of humanity's defenses like mendicant bias, steal a Halo ring, and presumably bring the flood back, setting up the final trial for the mantle.
Setting up almost the same events that happened like 100,000 years before.
Right.
That's
So
yeah.
so was the end of I guess my question there is, because everyone knows that Cortana is mirroring mendicant bias, I guess, but does that mean that the Gravemind knew the Ark wouldn't destroy High Charity? And does that mean that the Gravemind somehow manipulated the portal to make sure you wound up on Requiem?
I think that definitely is the most likely thing because he knows what he's doing. That's why he's sending you to Requiem to, awaken the Erdidact.
Who was also corrupted by the flood back in the day.
Right. And we'll get into that too.
Yeah, I think we should leave it at that. I think that's I think I've said all I've had to say, but I do want to take it back and chew on it a bit. Aegis, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
I think I'll want to do a little more research into seeing just, you know, if there's been like any discussion at all or like discussion about precursor tech and, how it interacts with, technology like the rings or with one another.
Yeah. Okay, guys. All right, then we're going to try to get this uploaded probably the same night that we recorded this. Please don't take this as a full-fledged lore video or anything. This was an actual conversation me and Aegis were having when we decided to say, wait, we should record this. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any thoughts. Let us know of any plot holes that we have missed, and whether you think this is possibly the end game, that the Flood are not the final mantle challenge, the Halo rings are.
Where did that bring you? Back to me, since you said endgame.
Pretty much. Yeah. Okay, I'm good to leave it there if you are, Aegis.
Yeah, ditto.
All right, guys, you have a good night. Please let us know what you think in the comments. We'll read Reddit, we'll read YouTube, and Aegis, maybe once we sort our own thoughts out a bit, we'll get up a full-fledged lore video. Or not lore, theory video.
Yeah, theory. 110%.
Okay, guys, have a good night.
Later, guys.